Hey there, Terry here with another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. And today I am chatting with a Vis Dev artist, and I guarantee that you are familiar with his work. That is if you've seen Boxtrolls, Hotel Transylvania 2 or 3, The Tale of Despero, Little Ricky, or The Amazing World of Gumball, and that is because he did the concept work for all of these animations. And his name is Sylvain Marc, and he is a French visual development artist, as well as a production designer, illustrator, and an animation director. And he started his path in Paris when he graduated from the highly esteemed Gobelins Animation School in 2006. Since then, he's been highly sought after for his amazing illustrative talents by Laia, Blue Sky, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Sony Animation, Passion Pictures, and many other top studios. Plus, I am a personal fan of his because I've been following his work for such a long time. And today he is going to chat about exactly how to develop concept art for a film or a TV show, and how to make it as a visual development artist if you're just starting out. So Sylvain, how are you doing today?
Good. Yeah. Nice to see you.
I'm very happy you're on the podcast. So you have a lot of credits under your name, but the first thing I want to understand is kind of your role as a Vis Dev artist. So like when you're working on a movie or TV show and it's in development, maybe you can use like a recent movie you worked on. At what point does like the director, whoever it is, contact you to come in?
Well, I guess when they're starting to build the team, but usually I'm quite early on projects. So
they would have like the story and the script already completed, and then
yes, yeah. Well, it depends, because if it's something that's already in production or pre-production or development, it depends. I tend to be very early, and like the project I'm working on right now, it used to be in a different studio very early, so it was only the director, writer, and then me doing some designs.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so very early on, that's like dream position. So I take the script and I help them figure out like key pictures, beat boards, characters, backgrounds, and things like that.
Do they usually have, like, does the producer have an idea, given the demographic they want to go for with the movie, of what it should look like typically? Like, do they say like, make this look kind of like Pixar, or make this look like, I don't know, whatever?
Not really. I mean, because it depends if it's like a very early in the development or a film that's been greenlit with its own style, like Hotel Transylvania films. It was already established franchise. If it's something new, then they will want something new, and that's always the next. But it's always like we want something fresh and new, but that's always the.
So how do they actually find you in the first place to work with?
I don't know. I think I usually get contacted directly, so I never have to to send portfolio, and so I get emails out of the blue, and oh, we're working on that film. Are you free? And yes, no, and that's how it works really. And then I guess with experience, and maybe my work is a little bit known, and then I tend to know producers and people in the team, so I get referred, and etc. So but the work comes to me, like I receive emails and just
Gotcha. So at one point you weren't receiving any emails to work on stuff because you were young and like a fresh artist and whatever. How did you get that first role as a Vis Dev artist? Was your first I guess artistic role in your career as a Vis Dev artist then?
No, I did Gobelins, the French animation school. So it's quite a well-known school and very professional. So they have days at the end of before the diploma where the recruiters come and choose students and have a look at the work they produce. So what happened is I started as an animator. So straight out of Gobelins, before graduating, I had 2 offers, one from DreamWorks and one from Framestore in London. And I really wanted to do DreamWorks, but my girlfriend was still in France, so I didn't want to go too far from her and family. So I chose to go to London. So I started as an animator at Framestore in how do you say that? Post production.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm blanking here.
That's all right.
On commercials and special effects and things like that.
So
And then while I was at, the funny thing is, while I was at Framestore that first year, I got an email from Sony where they were doing at the time the first Hotel T movie. And then they asked me for Vis Dev out of the blue, and I was just starting a new job and moving to a different country, out of school, and start trying to start a new job. So I turned that down. And what's funny is I ended up working on the second and third films. So then after Framestore, I moved to Cartoon Network Development Studio. They created a studio in London to develop, pilots for series, and so I got more into writing, directing. I did a pilot. I helped on different shows, amongst them Gumball, which is the one that got made and that is the most known.
yeah.
And then that studio closed down. That's when I moved full time to Vis Dev. And it's the same. I got an email from Gendy Tartakovsky, who was starting Popeye, and that's how I always wanted to do Vis Dev. So it's just like it happened organically.
Right, but okay, so let's backtrack a little bit because I mean I've seen your work. I've been following you for a while before I reached out to you, and your stuff is I think it's phenomenal. So obviously not everybody gets the opportunity to go get some offers out of school and then become an animator and then be asked to do Vis Dev on like Hotel Transylvania, like pretty fresh in their career. So why do you think people were reaching out to you specifically and finding you? Like, is it something in your work? Is it your relationships that you build in your career? Like, what gave you these opportunities, do you think, even if they come out of the blue?
I guess it's the work first, because when they contact you, they don't know you and how you work, and they just have it was at the time it was the blogs like Blogspot, and so I had my work online. Yeah, I'm that old, and so I guess it's my work, I guess. And then once you start working with people and they see you deliver and you're great, nice to work with, and that you're easy to work with, so I guess they call you back and they refer you to other people, and then you start to build credit. So all of a sudden, more recruiters or producers see your work, see that you have been on this and that project, and then they keep calling. They call you for projects.
So what is the mentality you have when you are working? Are you trying to do your best artistically? Are you trying to impress people that see your work? Are you always thinking like this is going towards my portfolio? Like, what is that mentality you have that enables you to always produce amazing stuff?
No, my mentality is, my job as a Vis Dev artist is to help the director bring his vision to life. So he's got like, there's a character, a background, and my job is to give him like options and try to materialize his vision. So I'm always focused on this, on trying to find out what he wants and help him in that way. So I'm not necessarily thinking of, I'm going to do the most amazing picture for me or my portfolio, because sometimes the work is, you don't necessarily do beautiful pictures, but it's useful for, because you need to understand how something works, and it doesn't make always the prettiest image, but that's, I'm always focused on the bigger picture of, what they need and what the film is. And,
So
I think
in
that's
like one sentence, what is the goal of a Vis Dev artist?
it's helping the director bring his vision to life, I think.
Gotcha.
And like build the world and put an image on words, basically.
Nice. So like when you're working on something, obviously what you present to the director it's still kind of rough in a sense, right? Like it's not the finished film.
So at what point do you go to the director and show him or her your work? Because like, do you take your rough sketches, or you develop your sketches to a point where you're comfortable and think they'll be happy with it? Or I don't know, what's the process?
So yeah, to backtrack to the first thing you were saying is, yeah, you don't work on the final picture, and even more so on 3D films, because you can't. I mean, what you do will never look like what's on on the. It's such a long process and different from 2D drawing, and it's so that sometimes. And sometimes when people do short films 2D, that's because they want to keep more of the artist's end, and because 3D is such a big machine that everything gets uh, taken and change, and yeah. So then the process, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the process is more, I would yeah, you start like rough, and then you give as much as options as possible to the director, so you don't want to go, you spend too much time and too much, and then reviews after review, you start to own on something and refine, and then you will clean up some things, and yeah, so that's a very organic process over time.
Yeah. So at what point do you feel like you're finished a piece then?
uh Well, sometimes the funny thing is you think you can have more time. It happened a lot with Gandhi for some reason. That's funny because I would develop things and present roughs, and I'm gonna next week I'm gonna clean it up and make it nicer. But that was enough there was enough information for what they needed. So it's like, yeah, done, approved, next. And I was like, oh no, I wanted to finish. Like it's in black and
No.
white, it's only rough, and yeah, but that's enough for the purpose. So sometimes you have to you in any case in animation you don't have to be very precious about what you do, or have a big sense of ownership, because it's a it's a process that involves a lot of people, and so you have to get your ego on the side and really think of the bigger picture of why you're here and what you're doing.
Yeah. Was that something, the ego on the side, was that something that was difficult to learn, or do you feel it's kind of easy to move past pieces and on to the next?
I think it's fine for me because I like to work with people, and I'm okay to collaborate, and I really don't mind being you know it being such collaborative and let go of things, and so it's okay for me. I never take it personally, or I never like, I wish I could have done this, or that's fine if I see that the director and the people I'm working with are happy, I'm happy. So that's fine.
So I still I have a lot of questions about the actual work itself. So how many, so for Hotel Transylvania 2, for instance, how many pieces are you delivering um, with as a Vis Dev artist for that film? Like, do they choose key scenes in the movie that they want to get a mood for? Are you creating all the characters? Like, what is the role involved there?
So I was mainly, because the characters were already established, I was more involved with the settings, backgrounds, and areas of the films that needed to be built for this precise episode.
Yeah.
So that what I was mainly involved with. I did a little bit of characters when characters were missing, but it was more to give an idea, or to see if I had, because they had their main character designer anyway. So I was more involved with the sets. So we have this to design. Like there's the attic of the castle that's never been designed. So have a go. How could it look? And there's this new place or this new area. So that's how it works.
So how many, I guess, assets or pieces in total did you create for that specific project?
The second or third film.
Pick one. The second one.
uh, I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember. There were maybe 6 places. I worked a lot more on the second one,
Yeah.
uh, and I did also a lot of work that has been cut out from the film.
Gotcha. So
I
would
remember
you
spent
say
6 months on the old sequence, like set in Paris, and in the end it was completely rewrote, and all that work down the drain. That's another part of the job, is there's a lot of that. You work a lot for things that never see the day of light, or that.
Oh, no. Can you even show anybody the stuff that never sees the day of the light of day?
It's a little bit frustrating thing. Like I've got 60% of what I do I can't show, and like I spent like a year and a half working on Popeye. That was 2012, and then it never got made, and I can't show. I can show a little bit, but not everything. And now, as years has passed, when I look at it again, I don't really want to publish it anymore because it looks old, and so that's a lot of work. Yeah, for nothing. But I get paid, so that's okay.
Fair enough. So like for Hotel Transylvania, you said you worked for 6 months on that, or was that just on one scene, or like how long of a contract do you work for?
Yeah, because Hotel Transylvania, I worked a little bit. I knew there was another project starting that I wanted to work with, that I was waiting. But the other thing, sometimes you say yes to a project, but in the time it starts, sometimes it gets delayed. So I knew, was that the case? Sorry, I'm confused with other projects from Sony. But I think, that's what happened. Like I only had like 6 months, and then until I move on to a different project.
So 6 months, and you created like a half dozen assets, or like a dozen assets, like.
I don't know. It's hard to.
I'm just trying to get like an idea for somebody who's thinking of getting into a Vis Dev. Like, what does the output actually look like?
Oh, you mean in terms of quantity of work?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. If you work, like if you work, it depends if you're full time or not, and so I would be, if I'm full time, I'm gonna have a review every week. So every week you have to produce things, and so it can go quite a lot of work after a while. But because it's so spread out, it's okay. I mean, that's the thing, is I tend to be quite long on projects, like rather than like a week. Like it works in commercials, or some other artists I know, they're shorter terms. But I tend to work quite long on projects.
Sure.
So the amount of work is quite spread it out over time.
So for like one piece, like I've seen on your portfolio on your website, like there's this beautiful cave scene where it's like green for Hotel Transylvania, and it's like got a really good mood and setting. What is it in your mind, like the perfect concept art piece? What are some of the, like, is it trying to convey a feeling and a mood and the characters and consistency? Like, what are the key things you strive to give the director an idea for?
Well, it depends depends at what stage. If it's very early, it's going to be really about how it looks like, the geometry. It's going to be more drawing, and what are the details, what's the geometry of a place. And but then if it's already moody in the brief, then you will want to add that in values, and then if you develop further into colors, and that's when you start to bring those ideas. But it depends. It always depends of the projects, which like Hotel T, it was already in production, so there were designers, there were painters, color artists. So I was more doing black and white because they wanted me for the design, and they had some other people painting the pieces I was doing. So that's the other thing. Sometimes you see what painters did, and you're like, oh, that's not how I would have done it. But that's fine. That's part of it's a collaborative project. And sometimes if it's more early, like the film I was mentioning earlier, if I'm very early at in the production with a few people, then you're gonna do more like more color work and peoples and color design. And so it depends of the project, what stage it is at, and if it's really design, if it's early development, if it's yeah. So
Gotcha. Well, okay, so
there's no one answer. There's no one project like the other, and
Well, yeah, to me, like what you're explaining, it sounds like every project is completely different, and the process is even different for every type of project. So what does like a typical year look like for you? Like how many projects are you working on? Like one or two a year, or like thinking of your career so far, what is like a typical year you can expect?
So again, it's always different. That's the fun thing about that job. It's never, it's not a office job. So some years I'm gonna be like on two projects. Sometimes like earlier like a few years ago, I tend to take a bit more as well, like commercials. And, if I could fit more when I was trying to build like connections and network, I tended to accept a lot of different things. So people would know that I was available and working, and then it was more trying to sow the seeds in a way. And now because I'm a bit more established, so work comes to me. I'm more comfortable in having long contracts, because then I don't have to worry about finding work. And so like this year, for example, I know like from January I signed for a year on a film, and I know it's going to be over, but so I have my whole year is already booked and planned, and which is quite nice because you know what you're going to do. And
Yeah.
so it depends of year from year, but it's as I said, I tend to be on long term on films, so which I'm fine with.
Gotcha. So you work remotely, and you've mentioned like you work with a director, and like some people will paint your work and stuff. How is it? How does it go? Like you work remotely, and how do you get in touch with the director and all the people that you work with? Is it just through like Skype conversations like this, or?
Oh yes, yeah. So I work from home remotely for mainly for US studios, and
Right.
now it's quite easy. Like I'm lucky because that's something that couldn't have happened like I don't know 15 years ago. Yeah. So now you have like Slack and all those things where you can chat with the teams, and then Google Hangouts, Skype. So everything is internet, and all the reviews are online, like Skype reviews. And
So how many people are you working with remotely on a project? Is it just the director, or like what are the typical contacts you need to be in touch with?
So again, it depends on the projects. So mainly the director, then they're going to be the producers, and then other artists. Like at the moment, on the film I'm working on, that's the first time I'm so involved with the project. So I'm also doing storyboards. I'm doing Vis Dev. So I speak to the different people on the team, and I'm working with other artists. So right now I'm involved. I'm interacting with a lot of people on that project. But usually it's going to be the director, producer, production designer, and that's it really.
Gotcha. Can you give me kind of like the entire process from that you work with? Like when you work with the director, like what are the steps that you take where he has like a meeting with you or she has a meeting with you, and then you come up with ideas, you go back and then you pitch them and then you get feedback? Like what is the whole process typically for any project? And I know you're going to say it depends.
No, this tends to be quite
Okay.
quite
Take me through it.
But it's not like a brief, like a meeting, a brief. They send you a script, animatic, whatever, like reference, and then they brief you on whatever you have to design. So then you will have a week for you, like you go away for a week, you start thinking about it, thumbnailing, roughing out. So the first 2 days, it's very like you think about it. It's not very productive in terms of what you actually draw. And then on the Wednesday, you start to panic because you have to produce and show that you're not slacking off. So and then at the end of the week you'll have like you send your stuff over and you have a review and then another pass depending, like then you refine, very organically like that. But it's usually like in increments of weeks, like
Okay.
1 week to another.
Are you working like a 40-hour work week then?
Yeah, minimum. Yeah. I tend to work. That's the thing with working remotely and from home is you tend to, it's harder to separate life and work, and
Yeah.
you also want to show that you're working and you're not slacking off. So you tend to be a bit harder on yourself. Like every hour working hour counts. It's not like when you're in the studio you will take a break, have a coffee with your workmates, and so here you tend to work a bit more, and sometimes I'm more of an evening person as well, so I will be the most efficient in the late afternoon evening, so I tend to work a bit later in the day, because that's when I'm the most efficient.
Gotcha. Sorry, I have a few more like really weird technical questions. One of them is like, I know a background painter who has been on a number of contracts through his career, and some of the contracts are like he'll get paid, say like $50 per background, no matter what the background is, if it takes him 100 hours or like 30 seconds, or he'll get paid a set amount to create backgrounds for like 3 months. Is that typical for a Vis Dev artist too?
I'm not too sure, but I'm paid in days. Like I invoice on a day. I mean, I have a rate per day. That's how it works. Because otherwise you can't. I know some studios that they always try to get artists to be paid not per day, but per like, oh, you will have to produce that much, and there's no way to control like if there's any retakes and etc. So it can become completely uncontrollable in a way. So I've always been paid per day, and that's only how I will never accept anything else. Because that's the most honest, and I mean that's the only way you can control how much you're gonna earn, and so.
What about pay per hour though?
Well, then that's the same. You just divide it by, but still, that's weird. Like it's like a day because it doesn't mean much. Like you can, in an hour, you can be still working but not doing or having a bad day or hour. But it doesn't mean you're not working, right? Because your brain is focusing and you're not doing anything else. So it's, and we're also doing art, so it's not something you can quantify in a way. Like so, sometimes you can be very efficient and do a lot in a few hours, and sometimes you can struggle because you're so.
Fair enough.
So for me, the per day rate is safe and it works fine. So.
Gotcha. So I have a question about like when you were very young, what was your dream to become? Like
I was
physically or otherwise?
How I get into it was through. So in France, we grew up with comics, French, Belgium French comic books, and that's a lot of French artists. That's how that's their main reference, and that's how they start. So I was reading all those comic books, and that's what I really wanted to do was comics. But then it's super hard to make a living, and even more so now. Like it becomes even harder and harder. I have friends doing comics, and it's such a struggle. So I also got into animation, and I remember very young seeing a documentary in French TV about Gobelins, the school. So I knew. So I went to see the open days of that school. That's when I decided that's where I wanted to go, and then I realized, also animation, there's more potential for work, and so. But
Gotcha.
comics was my big thing.
So do you, as a Vis Dev artist now, do you feel fulfilled with that dream, or do you still want to produce comics?
Yeah, it's still on the back of my mind, but then as I said, it's so hard to make a living out of it. My girlfriend is already a kids books illustrator,
Yeah.
and that's quite a struggle. So I'm glad I'm into animation because at least I can make a living out of it. As a Vis Dev artist, what I did it all these last few years because uh, I really liked it, and that's also something I wanted to do. And but now I'm kind of lacking I'm also more into story and directing, and so that's why right now I'm also transitioning a little bit on storyboarding, and on the film I'm working on I'm a Vis Dev artist and storyboard artist, and I'm developing the short film on the side. So because I need to fulfill that need as well, because it's one thing to produce pictures, but when you want to tell things, or it doesn't fulfill that side.
So in the future, do you see yourself taking steps to become a director?
Yeah, I'd like to, but I'm developing, like, have a independent short film project on my own. So that's what I want to do in the next, like, maybe from next year. Yeah.
Can you
I also wanted to at some point when I was at Cartoon Network, I developed a TV series project that became a feature project, but then the old studio collapsed, and so it was kind of shelved. And so it was always on my mind, but I guess opportunities where I had more opportunities to offers as Vis Dev artist as well, because that's also my specialty is design, drawing, and
can
so I
you
got
share anything about the short film you're working on?
yeah, it's going to be 2D short film. It's based on childhood memories, and a friend I used to have as a kid. So it's based on that. It's going to be it's going to be completely different from what I do, from my day work, like from mainstream animation. So it's going to be very personal, slow paced, 2D. I'm going to go the French way because in France we can have fundings for short films. So I got the CNC for writing it, and but that for the moment is a side project because there's no money.
Right.
But at some point I'm going to have to slow down on paid work and take like a big chunk of time to make it happen. Otherwise, it's going to always stay a side project.
Are you going to animate it and do the voice acting and the music, or are you working with other people as well?
No, I'm going to work with, because it's going to be between 10 and 15 minutes long, all
Wow.
2D. So I have a bunch of friends who are super talented at 2D animation, and I've got a good friend doing music, sound design as well. So I will need a lot of people, and that's the other problem is I want to be able to pay them, even if it's not much. But
Yeah.
that's why I'm going the French way to try to get fundings. And
That's good. You said you went to, I always mispronounce this school. In my mind, it's Gobelins, because that's how it's written. But Gobelins, is that
Gobelins.
close?
French.
Gobelins. So I know that school is insanely competitive.
It has nothing to do with goblins, like the creatures. It's just it's the name of the area of Paris where it's at. There's a carpet manufacturer that's been called Gobelins, and then it gave the name of the area and the metro station. So it's nothing to do with the goblins.
Oh, that's interesting. So I know that school is insanely competitive, and also the short films they produce every year are just phenomenal. How was your experience getting in, and also during?
So yeah, it's so getting in was tough because there's a big selection. So I tried the first time and I was turned down. They told me I was too young, which in hindsight I agree. And I'm glad that they said that, because then I did like an illustration school before. And so I could, because they tend to take older students a little bit, because it's such a professional school.
Yeah.
So I tried the first time. I got turned down. I did my illustration diploma, and I got in the second time.
All right.
And then the studies themselves are pretty amazing, super intense. But it's really great the way it's done. Like, because we had all the teachers are professionals, and so they come to. You have full-time teachers, but mostly professional coming to to do the different workshops, and so yeah.
So you did an illustration diploma, then you went to Gobelins, and now you're quite developed in your career. What was maybe the hardest thing to learn through all of those years of practicing and working?
Tricky
Or maybe
question.
the most important skill you've picked up, if you can't think of something.
Well, the thing I glad, like, because Gobelins, it's a very technical school. It's even more like a few years ago. It tends to change a little bit, but historically, it's more they used to teach to make technicians for animation.
Mm-hmm.
So we had less of a writing classes, and we were supposed to make short films, but we didn't really have writing classes, and so that's why earlier on you ended up with films, mine included, which were only chases, of characters chasing around, and because the writing wasn't very developed. So that's what I did more when I started working at Cartoon Network, when we had guys, storyboard artists from the US coming to do workshops with us. So that's when I learned, like, storyboard driven shows, and to write, to work from outlines and scripts. And so that's the thing and I'm still learning, and I'm really interested in, but I have less skills. That's all the writing part, and I would say.
What is something that has been very important that you've learned in writing? To make a really good story.
What's funny is I learned, so I read a lot of books about how you're supposed to structure this, how to do it, all the typical books you can read about it. But now with my short film, because I'm working on memories and from real life, so it helps me to give it a structure. But I'm going also the other way around, where consciously I'm breaking all those rules, because I'm talking about real life, and real life isn't scripted, or things happen because they happen, and drama and conflict comes because time passes, because people get old, because so that's the interesting thing I'm dealing with at the moment, because I'm working on my short film, and I'm into story. But what I learned also at Cartoon Network was writing at the storyboard stage. That's really how they work in the US, and which is very organic and natural. So I picked that up, and that's also because we're so visual people, and it's a visual language. So I would write while I storyboard, and back and forth with the script, or
That's interesting. And so what I'm getting is it's like structure is very important, and also I think it's interesting that you write with a storyboard too. I know they do that at Cartoon Network, and they're one of the few studios that kind of does that. But cool. What is, given, I guess, through your journey, animation, especially like Vis Dev and stuff like that, is pretty hard to get into. Like, it's very competitive. So what has been, or who or what has been something that has been really helpful for you personally throughout your career?
I don't know. I think tenacity. Do you want me to name someone, or?
It can be whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's a person that's helped you out, or like just perseverance or something. I'm just wondering, like, what keeps you
'Cause
going?
oh, it's like, oh, because it's, oh, I know, yeah. What keeps me going is because it's a passion. Like you can't do that without being passionate about it. I mean, it's not a office bank job, or you don't go into it because you're looking for your next holiday, or so that's what it's just because you always want it. That's the tricky thing as well, is whenever you have projects coming your way, and it's so hard to turn them down sometimes because you're like, oh yes, that's it. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's exciting. So I guess that's what keeps you going, right?
Gotcha. So maybe this last little part, I just want to, for somebody else who was looking to get into Vis Dev or like an illustrative career, what's kind of the first thing they should do or focus on if they want to follow in your footsteps?
Well, just draw and produce good work, I guess. And now it's, well, yeah, I was gonna say now it's so easy because you could put everything out there, but it's also hard because now there's so much out there as well. Because when I was younger, when I was at school, we used Blogspot, and that's when, so there was a quite cool emulation about it, and I met people online then that I'm still in contact with now from the Blogspot days, because there were the comments and there were not as much online. The commenting thing, I kind of find it again with Instagram in a way, but now there's so many and so much stuff and so many people, so maybe it's harder to stand out in a way. So I don't know. There's no recipe. I'm lucky that work comes my way, and so I'd be hard pressed to give any advice. But I think like putting your work out there and making good work is a good way to.
So do you think somebody should go to school for this as well?
Well, yeah, because definitely. I mean, I went to illustration and animation school, and the emulation you get there is quite unique. It's something you kind of don't get as much afterwards in a way. Well, that's true if, like me, you work from home, because you're de facto a bit less connected with artists on a day-to-day basis. But school, I think what's cool is great about it is the emulation with people, the people you meet there, they might be the people you will work with later. So school is great. But then I know in the US, in France, lucky it's quite, my illustration school was free. Gobelins was cheap at the time, so I could do it. Now it's more expensive. I couldn't have done it, at the price it is now. And I know in the US it's so expensive. So then I know there are like alternative now, like the guys, what they do at Schoolism, for example, is quite amazing, because I know it's not that expensive, but the lessons you get there is amazing. So there are different options, but yeah, school. I mean, school is school, right? That's
Right.
I think that will give you a heads up, because you'll see people that are producing stuff, and you want to be better and to, so
Yeah, there's a big
push.
community part of it too. Yeah. So say I'm putting together like a portfolio with my art for a Vis Dev project. What are like 3 or 4 things that are absolutely mandatory that I show off?
This again, it's always a tricky question because I'm not really a recruiter, and people come to me, and I'm not always sure what they respond to. But it depends. Like if you want to be a Vis Dev artist, you have to show, a good amount of flexibility, I think. Well, you have to show your skills, like that you're a good draftsman, and then that you're flexible, characters, backgrounds, color, whatever. So I think that would be the most important.
Gotcha. So include some background, some character, color, and then show that you can work on a variety of projects.
Yeah, but unless you, well, it depends because some people will want to be only character designers. Some people will only want to be background artists. So it's also put what you want to do and show what you want to do, what you're best at, and you know.
Gotcha. Is there anything that you would tell somebody, or like as a piece of advice, if they're going to follow this career, or something maybe surprising that they might not have thought of? Like when you think of your younger self, what would you say to your younger self, knowing you've taken the path now that you have?
Maybe I would say relax. Everything. I don't know. Well, because it's my example and how I do it is, I could tell that it's possible to do it remotely as well, because that's something I enjoy, and you have a part of compromise and sacrifices to do it, to work remotely, but it's doable, and it's also a very nice way to do it because you can live where you want and still be able to work on big feature for US studios, but you don't have to be. I mean, it works. Like studios are okay with people working remotely. Like let's say you don't have to be in the US, and if you're somewhere else in a little town or in a different country, and you're like, oh, how am I going to do to work on those films? And it's possible. So
so apply anyways, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask. Is there anything you wanted to share or whatnot right now?
No, not really.
No.
I'm fine. Yeah. We covered it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing all your experience in your career, and also good luck with your short film in the future. That's really exciting.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you want to get in touch with Sylvain or check out his work, I'm going to include his Instagram in the description of this podcast. So make sure you check it out. It's Polyminth. I think I am saying that right.
Yes.
And Polyminth. Okay. And that's all for now. Okay, bye.